in my rifle, in my life. Another in the left, in my rifle, in my life. Another in the left, in my rifle, in my life.
Everyone's going to be talking about Mythcon. Why should I be any exception? 2017, ladies and gentlemen. We have something of a problem in the skeptic and atheist community, in that when it comes to our standard foe, if you like, our nemesis, if our nemesis is an ineffective, reedy little nerd who wouldn't say boo to a goose, our nemesis, if you will, is creationism. And since time immemorial, but particularly since 2001, atheism and new atheism has basically done this to creationism. But grim, you may object at this point, oh imaginary viewer. Skepticism isn't just limited to atheism. We talk about other stuff as well. We rip the piss out of Deepak Chopra, and we go against alternative medicine and all kinds of new age woo. And yes, this is all true. The skeptic community has indeed gone after all these kinds of things. You know, frauds, cancer cures like coffee enemas and whatever else. Jeff Holiday does a good job on this, particularly the alternative medicine. Other people specialise in doing other things, but there's also a wing of the skeptic community that has turned its eye to things like postmodernism, certain aspects of politics, you know, developments in modern feminism and so on. You know, these are all kind of interrelated. And to a certain other wing of the skeptical community, well.
No, sir, I don't like it.
But that shouldn't really be a problem, should it? I mean, we're all mature adults. We're all devoted to rationalism and skepticism and the beauty of rational, logical, evidential argument. You know, we should be able to thrash these things out. And, you know, we're skeptics, goddammit. Nothing at all should be off the table as regards critical examination, right? Anyway, to cut an epic story, an epic tale, an Edda, if you will, into a slightly shorter, Tolkien-esque epic, Mythcon decided that they would encompass this expansion of skepticism and invite some of the more popular YouTubers of the skeptosphere to their conference in order to, you know, widen the appeal, bring some new blood in, broach some new topics, that sort of thing. Bad idea. Now, I don't mean it was a bad idea in and of itself. I think it was a very good idea. As the guys involved have said themselves, you know, things have become staid and boring. You know, creationism's played out thanks to the Buddha palm. It's just done. So we should talk about other things, and you know, and the doneness extends to a lot of other stuff. And we live in a much more politically interesting, to some of us at least, world. And there are issues in academia. There are issues around free speech. There are issues around postmodernism and social science. And God, there are not enough scare quotes in the world to put around science in reference to social science. It's trash. Unfortunately, we need good social science. So, you know, the idea was a good one, a great one, but I don't think somehow the people involved really anticipated the degree of pushback and nastiness that would ensue, and this despite the fact that they were also having talks against Scientology, which they felt was also something of an expansion. But they didn't count on the social justice warriors and a certain Christy Winters in particular. You see, Mythcon exists at the what I hope is the peak of a problem that started with Atheism Plus. Now, if you're not aware, Atheism Plus was basically an entryist attempt by a bunch of kind of pseudo-left social justice warriors to kind of co-opt and in many ways take over the atheist and skeptic movement. Now, there's an obvious problem with that, in that when you come into a community that is skeptical, you know, intellectual, evidence-based, and you come at it with a philosophy and an ideology that is really not based on particularly solid grounds, you're going to run into trouble, especially when you try to foist things on that community. So there was basically a split. Now, my position is that I am a genuine progressive. That the term has become corrupted. I am far left and very libertarian on the political compass. That's small L libertarian, not, you know, the Paul Ryans or the Ayn Rands of this world. It just means I have a very strong belief in personal freedom. So, you know, I'm at that extreme. So that's the position that I come at, and my criticisms of this thing that calls itself the left wing today are rooted in left wing ideology. A lot of people come at it from the right wing, but I'm one of you, so to speak. Except I don't think that you're one of me anymore. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. But there was this attempt to foist a particular political ideology onto the burgeoning atheist skeptic movement. And essentially this comes down to a divide between what I call political atheists, political skeptics, and people who are atheists and skeptics on the point of principle. So I am an atheist and a skeptic because I do not find arguments for God and arguments for many of these other things convincing. So that is a skeptical atheist. A political atheist might, for example, say, have issues with abortion. So they are in many ways kinds of atheists of convenience. It just so happens that they oppose the evangelical right, and so they find themselves aligned politically, for the most part, with most atheists and skeptics. But they're not coming at it from a position of skepticism, and when skepticism turns its baleful eye of Sauron upon their own sacred cows, they get upset, basically. This seems to be what it is. They don't like their ideas being questioned or examined. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of their ideas, or at least their goals, you know, equality, fairness, all the rest of it. But the tactics they use to go about it, the science upon which they base a lot of what they're doing, is manifestly unsound, and postmodernism is manifestly unsound. So these two sets of ideals inevitably clashed, and people that they thought were their allies, and who were for the most part on most things, were skeptical of the claims that they were making, and they basically got enormously butthurt about that. So there's this split, and as it turns out, when you're butthurt and you lash out, you call anyone that disagrees with or even questions you on your beliefs a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a transphobe, and all these other things. It upsets people because they're probably not any of those things. They are just examining the statistics. They're trying to drill down and get to the reality of a thing upon which you have already made an emotional prejudgment. And this is, you know, this is a part of the big problem with the social sciences, in that a lot of the data, the investigation and so on, comes from activists. Activists, particularly in some fields, that reject the idea of peer review, where peer review basically means my mates read this and they like it. You know, there's methodology issues, they start from conclusions, that there's all kinds of problems with the social sciences. And if social sciences are sheep, then Christy Winters, as someone involved in gender studies, exists at the woollier end of the sheep. So to briefly recap, there's a split in the atheist community between actual skeptics and people who refuse to examine certain sacred cows, shall we say. That's me being ungenerous, but a lot of these people are cunts, so fuck it. And then, as this rolls on, you know, things change. The skeptic community online gets rather successful through examining a lot of these things and expanding its criticism from religion into other areas. And it makes a lot of good arguments. And the problem is that the other side doesn't even bother to argue back. They create an echo chamber, and in so doing inadvertently create a dual echo chamber. So the people in one group only ever end up talking to each other, and the people in the other group only ever end up talking to each other, and never the twain shall meet. And so one group gets a rather extreme, but perhaps not entirely unjustified view of social justice warriors as insane extremists who've lost touch with reality. And the other side gets this weird view that everyone everywhere is somehow a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, a homophobe, and so on. And so things go. Enter Mythcon. Mythcon wants to try and bring this burgeoning, successful arena of skepticism into a convention environment and have discussions and so on around it. You know, controversy is good for attention, and perhaps they agree that these things, well, basically nothing should be off limits for discussion and so on. And to this end, they invite certain somewhat controversial YouTubers, shall we say, perhaps most especially Sargon of Akkad, or Carl Benjamin. I've got a lot of time for Carl in a lot of ways, because he is willing to entertain ideas and discussions and talk to just about anybody. A lot of people won't talk to him. I disagree with him fundamentally on a lot of things. I think he's very, very wrong on left-wing politics. I don't think he really understands a lot of political ideology. He can't seem to separate socialism and Marxism, for example. I've seen him slide to the right a bit, but and support bad candidates in things like the French elections and so on. But I believe a lot of that is down to a phenomenon that's beyond the scope of this video, and maybe I'll do something about that later. But yeah, I've got a lot of time for him simply because he is willing to talk and argue with just about anyone. And my chief problem with the opposite side, the people like Christy Winters, is that they're not willing to discuss with anyone, and if a discussion is even taking place, they seek to shut it down, and this is what happened with Mythcon. Now, a lot of people have dismissed Mythcon as some sort of dumpster fire disaster for the atheist and skeptic community, but I'm having a hard time seeing it that way. Well, here's the thing. So they announced this, they announced some of the guests and so on, and there's a good mix of guests. There are the online shitlords, and there's some more conventional people, you know, who are booked to speak. And so Christy, you thought I was going to use that clip again, didn't you? No, rule of threes. Stops being funny after that. Anyway, Christy and a little gang of sycophants and hangers-on and you know, credulous followers, social justice warriors, set out to campaign against Mythcon to disinvite these speakers. Now this is a part of the big thing and the criticism and problem that people like me within the left, and people like Carl possibly outside the left, more classical liberals. This is the big issue that we have with people like this, that rather than have the discussion, rather than win the arguments, which surely if they have good arguments they should be able to do, rather than do that, they just try to shut down discussion, they try to deplatform people, they try to get them disinvited, they try to shut down events and so on. And that's why I'm hopeful about this, because Mythcon basically in the face of all of this went, fuck you, we're doing it anyway. Good for them, brilliant for them, well done to them. But that wasn't the end of it, and this is why they keep saying that the social justice warriors were way worse than the Scientologists, and everyone knows how bad Scientologists are. So SJWs, take that on board and understand how unreasonable and horrendous you are being. You are worse than Sea Org. Okay? That's a big fucking deal. Okay, so take it in, absorb it, think about it. But it didn't stop there, of course. They didn't just try and get the convention to disinvite these people. They then started harassing and going after the organisers and their families and some of the other speakers. They went directly after the speakers. Why are you appearing alongside blah 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 blah? Well, they were misrepresenting a lot of things that people said, taking them out of context and so on, and we'll get to a prime example of that in a minute. So basically these people do everything that they claim the other side does but doesn't, but they do it openly. Really, you know. And again, this is hypocrisy really pisses me off. Let me put it that way. I know it shouldn't, because in order to be a hypocrite you have to be at least trying to do the right thing and failing. But no, I cannot abide it at all, not one jot. And unfortunately this succeeds. They manage to bully a lot of the speakers who are really just the more run-of-the-mill people. You know, not even the people that they objected to. They managed to get a lot of them to pull out on the basis of intimidation and lying. You know, the very people who may perhaps have been a good foil to the people that they didn't like. You know, the people that they objected to. If they hadn't diluted the attendance, then maybe there could have been some better speakers. You know, some people to challenge the people that they objected to in a competent way, because fuck knows the people they sent to do the challenges were not competent. So anyway, Sargon, the person most of them seem to object to most strongly, is set up to have a debate, basically a discussion on stage. And the champion that the social justice warriors sent really screwed the pooch when it came to that debate. Now, Carl Sargon is not the best debater. You know, he only essentially drew with Christy Winters in their debate because they were basically having two separate debates and he wasn't prepared. So, you know, he's not the best debater, but he destroyed this guy. And he didn't even have to do anything, really. He could have just sat there laughing and he would have won that debate. Because the guy just came up there not even looking to debate. He was just there to cast aspersions on Carl. He was there to misrepresent things that Carl had said or done. He was there to smear and hurl accusations. Unfortunately, the audience wasn't having any of it, and they held this guy to account. And in the end, he just fled the stage, refusing to answer any questions. You know, and later on, he had a friend of his confront Carl outside and try to start a ruck, which ended with this guy being thrown out of the convention over Sargon's protests. So it seems from the recording. Just Google, yeah, Mythcon, and you should find it. You should find these snippets of video and so on. You can judge for yourself. Nobody's seen the full debate yet. I've talked to people who were there. I've seen perhaps more recordings and snippets than anyone else, but still, it certainly appears that Carl wiped the stage with this guy, which is pathetic. You know, this was an opportunity. You should have had someone up there to actually challenge him on his ideas and the things he talked about. Instead, you put this muppet up there, and the best he can do is to spew racist garbage and sexist garbage, and to try and gotcha Carl and fail miserably. And there's one particular example which is a kind of exemplar of the issue here, I think. So that's worth spending a little time on. The point that was pushed on stage, the point that really seems to have incensed a lot of these SJW types, is a clash that Carl had with Jess Phillips. Now, there's a lot of things, like I say, I don't agree with Carl on. There's a lot of things he's done that I think are stupid or ineffective or whatever. But there's two things that I think he and others have been particularly brilliant on, things that I think have been masterstrokes. And that is Kekistan and this interaction with Jess Phillips. Now, it's important to get the context on this, and this seems to be something that the SJW types are allergic to or can't comprehend. You know, they would think that Nick Frost's character here is insulting people.
Can I get any of you cunts a drink?
So here's the context. Jess Phillips is a British MP, an ardent feminist, and if you'll allow me to get genuinely angry rather than sarcastic just for a moment, someone who has repeatedly attempted to block discussions on men's issues in Parliament on International Men's Day, and who has openly laughed about the idea of even discussing the rates of male suicide. This is a horrendous cunt of a woman. Fuck her and everything she stands for. Now, does the fact that she's
They're horrible cunts.
excuse any genuine harassment towards her? No, of course not. Of course it doesn't. Okay, not at all. But that's not what we're talking about here. Anyway, at the time, she was on something of a press round to support Take Back the Internet, which was an initiative that she was involved in, and yet another in a long line of attempts by her to back censorship of the internet. Now, needless to say, Carl and any other reasonable human being on the planet knows that this kind of censorship is an incredibly bad idea, and that using spurious internet threats, which is what she was doing, to fuel and excuse your censorship is profoundly disingenuous. And in particular, she was emphasizing online rape threats, and she was emphasizing how these things affect women. Though, if you look at Pew and any number of other surveys, you'll see that the chief victims of online harassment are men. They just don't seem to make as much of a fuss about it for whatever reason. So she was using her status as a supposed rape victim and these supposed rape threats that anyone with a lick of sense knows are entirely spurious to back this push for internet censorship. She was going around and around the press talking about this. Oh, I get hundreds of rape threats online. Well, how many times have you been raped as a result of them? Right, horrible as they are, they're meaningless. And the same goes for any number of other online threats against anyone and in any form. Anyone with a lick of sense or the slightest bit of internet experience knows they're spurious. Carl knows they're spurious. So Carl sets this trap for her, and I think it's a brilliant Chris Morris-like trap for her. He sets out and he says, because she's complaining about rape threats, let us not forget, this is the context, he says that he wouldn't rape her. No, wait, sorry, apparently this is super important. He said, at least in the tweet, if not in the video, I wouldn't even rape you. Apparently the even is super important and has some kind of alchemical magic that turns an anti-threat into a threat. So he says specifically, you know, you're so worried about these online rape threats, don't worry, I wouldn't rape you, I wouldn't even rape you. Which is just an emphasizer with an undertone, a subtext of you're such a hideous person that I wouldn't even consider it. If you want to unpack the entire thing into what's implied as well as what is explicitly said. It's, I wouldn't have consensual sex with you, I wouldn't even rape you, you're ugly. Again, that's it. But here is the brilliant thing about it. She then goes out again into the media. Carl traps her into going on television and complaining that hundreds of men don't want to rape her.
Wearing a t-shirt like this, the online paedophile can disguise himself as a child.
Having previously gone around and complained about rape threats.
Online paedophiles can actually make your keyboard release toxic vapors that make you suggestible.
Oh, it's terrible, there's all these people who want to rape me online. Oh, it's terrible, there's all these people who don't want to rape me online. It's brilliantly Mauritian in the way that it exposed her stupidity, her hypocrisy, her disingenuousness, and the disingenuousness of a complicit media. It was absolutely perfect. Anyone who thinks that it's somehow a threat of rape is... But again, this is why I'm actually fairly hopeful coming out of this. You know, Mythcon, I told them where to go. For all they intimidated a few speakers, maybe that won't happen next time. Maybe we can see more events like this with some actual debate. You know, so they failed to stop it going ahead. They failed to debate, and they were exposed as liars and dickheads, except for a handful of sycophants that are always going to stick with them, just as a handful of Trump's fans are always going to stick with him. Maybe we can just bypass them and carry on and start having some useful, good debates now. Maybe we can start examining these ideas. And Sargon's far from the only problem here. They were going to have Amos Yee here, and for all he's a moronic, idiotic edgelord who I stopped following because he was too annoying, you know, he is a victim of anti-atheist state discrimination. He had every right to be there, should have been there, should have been talked to, should have been interviewed. And if he brought up any of his stupid edgelord ideas, we should have arguments against them. This is the point of discussion. This is the point of debate. You know, you attack and fight and test each other's ideas, and if they don't work, you change them. And if the argument is entirely one-sided, there's only yourself to blame. Morons. And if you're gonna go after people, if you're gonna attack people, maybe you shouldn't go into that on the basis of ill-informed, willfully ignorant, willfully disingenuous smears and lies put out there by someone who thinks they're being stalked by a cartoon bear. Zang.
Scale.